Welcome to the Rise Science podcast. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Katie McKay. Katie is head of sales enablement and distribution strategy at John Hancock Investments, one of the largest life insurers in the US with nearly 132 billion in assets under management. Katie has over 20 years of experience in the financial industry, starting at Putnam, a global investment firm, and then later at Lincoln Financial. At John Hancock, Katie oversees training, development, implementation of data and technology for sales success. In an industry that can seem quite traditional and stodgy from the outside, Katie stands out as a sales leader with a bold, human-oriented approach to how to support her team's well-being and empower their performance. She's actually recently invested in meditation for her team and is exploring how sleep might also play in. I'm really excited to talk to Katie today to have a discussion about why she believes that the human component is such a critical part of an effective sales enablement strategy. Katie, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's so fun. And I just even before we got live, so interesting to hear you talk about some of the changes with work from home, how you're thinking about employee well-being and happiness. And so I'm very, very excited just to hear how you got there. And I really want to start with your background. I mean, you started, ultimately selling financial products, but how did you get there from background in political science? What was that switch? And, how did you get into ultimately selling?
That's a great question. Kicking and screaming, actually. So I was a poli-sci major, but I graduated. I'm quite old now. I'm going to be 50. But when I graduated, there was just no job. So I started working for a think tank in Washington and loved it. But that was kind of an internship, and then worked for an insurance company, actually as a bodily injury claims adjuster, where I would have to go get statements from people, and just really didn't like that whole process. And so networked with someone and found a job as an assistant actually at a financial services company, and sat next to the sales desk and was like, these people have a lot of fun. I think I would like to do this. And so it just kind of took off from there. Yeah. And I've never looked back. I loved it. Love it.
What when you were there, like at the desk as an assistant, just hearing it, like what was going on? I mean, was it just like they were on the phones all day and like you were like, what are you, what was?
Yeah, they were on the phones a lot, but this was like mid 90s, right? So it was just a lot of people liking to have a good time, giving each other a hard time, wanting to go out afterwards. And I was like 22 years old, and I'm like, this is kind of incredible. Like, they're working hard, but they're also having so much fun. And they have such a good time doing it that I was like, I could do this. Like, this isn't rocket science. Like, I could do this. And I'm just such a social person that it just worked for me. I actually was really afraid of it, to present in front of people or to make outbound phone calls that were cold calls. It still makes me like want to be sick because I was just so stressed about it. But once you get on a roll, and I worked with some really good people that taught me a lot of really good ways to connect with people via phone, I started to really get into it. And then when I worked at Putnam, eventually they promoted me out to the field. And it was one of those things where I really didn't want to do it. I kind of explained to them multiple times, and they were just like, well, if you want to keep moving forward, this is the role for you. So I moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and from Boston, which was a big move, and just kind of went on the journey. I just feel like the right, things happen, and you got to kind of just go with it and figure it out from there.
Huh. Yeah, so, no, it's cool to just like, it was actually like the fun and excitement in sales, and then you started doing it. You're like, oh, I actually kind of like this.
I loved it. And the best thing for me about sales, I know a lot of salespeople love hitting the number, right? That's like their big thing. For me, I always like the connection with people. That always is what drove me, is just really helping people and understanding why they, where they were in their own business and what they needed from us, and how could I help them further their business, knowing that in the end, they would help me with my business too. And to me, I needed a reward, and the financial reward, while it was great, wasn't really what motivated me. It was more of the seeing progress and helping people really was what motivated me. And realizing that that's okay in a sales role doesn't make you any less competitive or good at what you're doing. My sales numbers were always very, very good, but it was just a different way.
I love that.
And it's an interesting journey, right? Like, it was much more rewarding.
Well, and you're at the end of the day, like you don't feel like you're just hitting a number. You're really helping someone see progress in their own life and their own
Right.
business, and leading from a place of empathy, which is something we talk about a ton on the show. And we've talked with some great people about that. It's like so interesting that for you just came naturally. Like, hey, I know if I can make someone else's life easier, better, their business more successful, that's a win for me.
It is. And the other thing was too, is I work in a male dominated business, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I think when I became a salesperson, I think I may have been around the eighth woman that they had ever hired to go out in the field at that company, which
Wow.
says a lot. But I think empathy comes very naturally to women. And I used it actually as a differentiator, not on purpose. I didn't go into it thinking I'm going to be empathetic and come at it that way to be a differentiated person other than my competitors, but it just kind of worked that way. And so
Yeah.
I had a lot of times where people would call me and just ask me for advice, and many times I would actually refer them to other companies, just knowing that that was a better fit than what we had. And years later I still have people that call me just to say, we really appreciated that honesty, and the ability, and knowing that you weren't always out for yourself, that you really truly wanted to help us.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and that's
I,
rewarding right there.
yeah, it's super rewarding, and I think that's the best of what sales can be, and it gets such a bad reputation for so many different
Uh,
reasons. And one of the interesting things in talking with, we've had a couple like really prominent sales leaders on the show. Some of them, Craig Wartman is an example, who runs the Sales Institute at Kellogg, and
oh
they
wow.
study sales all day. And he started his career at IBM, and I brought up this idea of like, we're seeing a lot of sales teams and sales leaders go more towards what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
How do we lead with empathy? How do we help solve the customer's job? Whether or not it's our solution, like how do we help them see progress? Like that seems like it's the in vogue style. And so I asked
Yeah,
Craig, I was like, is this new? And he told me, he's like, Jeff, back in the I think it was early 80s when he was onboarding at IBM, he's like, that's what we were taught. It was
totally.
actually starting there. And so he's like, I don't know where along the way we got, misguided, but ultimately coming back to that point of like, your job is to help someone else, and being really good at that, I
Yep.
think is important. And, I've obviously done a number of different of roles in sales. And one of the things, my graduate degree is actually in design, in product design,
Oh, cool.
and not in sales. But I remember going back because I was doing enterprise sales. I remember going back to my graduate program, and I remember saying like, you're all designers and you're teaching, we're teaching design, but you actually have an amazing background to do sales because you're all wired for empathy, and you actually are taught
Totally.
how to do ethnographic research and how to do user research and interviews. And like, that's really what you're doing. That's what great sales is.
Totally.
Uh,
Totally. But, and I think, and the other thing is too, is like, you see a lot of salespeople get burnout. And if you're just pitching the same product every day and that's all you're doing, and I can remember having this out of body experience one time driving in between customers in I had Northern California, and I
oh,
was
interesting.
thinking like, this is it? Like, really? Like, this is all I'm gonna do for the rest of my life? Like, this can't be it. And I think it's because you're talking product. And once you switch it and go more to the empathy side, and you hear people's stories and what they're trying to do and how they're trying to help their customers, you really, to me, that's much more engaging, and you're
Oh
using your
yeah.
brain. And I just think you have a longer life expectancy, I think, when you're doing that.
Interesting. Yeah, I really like that approach. For you, so when you think about just coming up through, obviously now you're leading a much bigger team, have a different mandate than an individual seller. Was the link between sort of sleep and your well-being, not sleep, I'm sorry, just your own performance and your well-being, like, was that something that you thought about, in sales? I mean, it seems like definitely the empathy piece was big to you. And it definitely seems like you were aware of, I'm not feeling super satisfied with
Yeah.
selling this way, and I'm going to change. But did that evolve in any way for you as you started to get more mature in your career?
Yeah, it did. So I actually, when I was a salesperson, as most people on the road, we don't eat very healthy. So, I was kind of living on Dunkin' Donuts coffee when I could find it, and candy at gas stations when I was gassing up. And
Yeah.
I really did a number to my immune system. So I actually developed an autoimmune disorder in my early 30s. So I was still a
Wow.
salesperson out in the field, and Sleep, I was not sleeping. I had a really high stress, like anxiousness, nervousness. It was like this whole crazy experience that I had never had. I was pretty mellow person. Um, and I just had to I've done a very long health route to try to heal myself. And along the way, a few years ago, I really reached a max stress point with work and my health. And that's when I flipped to meditation myself. And it really, I think, saved my life. And it made such an impact on my own performance that I started to think about that, and my diet. I eat a very restrictive diet just because of my autoimmune, and started to realize that, by eating certain foods, I was thinking more clearly. By meditating, I was more focused, and by sleeping more, I was more focused and able to concentrate better in meetings. I was having a very hard time concentrating, had a lot of brain fog, all due to my autoimmune and my gut health. But I think that started to make me realize that, hey, wait a minute, like, we have salespeople today that work 5 days a week. They work their butts off, right? They're working 50, 60 hours a week, and they're very productive. But if you want more productivity out of them and to sell more, like, you're not going to get more hours in the day. Like, you've already maximized that. So what are we going to do as a company to help these people become more productive? And it's not time. So what other things can you use around the margins? And that's when I started to say, like, man, like, if you think about sleep and meditation and food and working out, if you start doing those things when you are in a meeting with a client, you're much more focused, you can listen better. And through that, I think you would drive more sales and more productivity, because you're much more in tune than if you just show up in a meeting, you slam out what you need to get done, and you leave.
Right, right. And not only on the productivity side, but just on the well-being side and the retention side. Like, you're going to have
Correct.
people that are burnt out. I mean, thankfully, you found
Correct.
these tools and you were able to find them on your
Yes.
own. And so one of the
Yes.
questions that we think about a lot is, why, so you're very focused on saying, okay, time is maxed out. So we can't
Yep.
have our salespeople spend more time in terms of just number of hours. Can we make those hours more efficient? And can we make those
Yep.
hours better and the quality of the time better? And so what sorts of things are you looking at even within that? So obviously you've mentioned, sleep and meditation, nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
exercise, like those are sort of basics. Why haven't you
Yep.
focused more on, like, let's get better lead generation, let's get better numbers to,
Oh, we've
like,
done that.
and again, so how do you think about, when you're sitting in that meeting, it's like, look, we got to hit this number. We
Yep.
want to do it in the right way. That is going to help our people. Like, what's been the trade-off, and what's been that discussion internally about, like, well, should we do this? Like, I know you recently invested in meditation for your
Yeah.
team. Like, what was that discussion like with the other leaders at John Hancock to say, let's invest in meditation and not, like, upgrade our, like, CRM tool to have this new plugin that's going to auto dial in people's, like, what was that
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
trying to have that
It's not been
conversation?
easy, I will say that. So I run sales enablement. So I do focus on efficiency and tools, and how are we putting messages out, and what kind of ways are we giving them to our salespeople, and how do we make them more efficient from even what we're pushing out. So I definitely do that, and I'm known for that in our company. So what I think that gave me a leverage a little bit, so that when I did start bringing some of this stuff in, it wasn't like I just was like popping stuff from nowhere onto something. I work with all men, some women, but mostly men, and they're very traditional. I work in
Yeah.
financial services, so this is obviously a little bit crazy for them sometimes. So I started dripping probably about 3 or 4 years ago on some of this stuff, and just saying, like, hey, I meditate, just kind of like feeling them out. And then started to find some of the salespeople that came off my sales desk and went into the field, and started talking to them, and they were meditating. So I kind of started saying, like, here's some top performers out in the field that meditate. So I would kind of drop that into conversations, like, hey, it's not just me anymore. It's like, here's this person and this person that are doing really well in the field, and they're still meditating. And then we came into contact with a woman from Harvard that started to do a seminar for some of our advisors, and it started to get a good uptake. And so I went back to them and just said, hey, look, like, people want meditation. They want to figure out how to make themselves better, and also a better version of themselves, whether it be at work or at home. Like,
Totally.
people are stressed, and I don't thank goodness for COVID, but COVID certainly helped in that you had people that were so traditional that now were working out of their house and in a whole different ball game that they had ever been in themselves. And I think they all started to feel some of the impacts of that isolation. And the senior people were very, very worried about employee engagement. And so once you start getting into employee engagement, when you start bringing up some of these tools, people are much more open-minded about it from that perspective. For whatever reason, employee engagement, they're all about it. If you say it's going to help with productivity, that's a lot harder for them to understand. So why fight it? Go with the path of least resistance.
Right. Totally. Totally. Yeah. Engagement is such an interesting concept because I feel like it's gotten so much uptake. And even if you look at like the, annual strategic plans of a lot of the big public companies, employee engagement's a KPI.
It is.
Have you seen it, from a sales standpoint? How have you seen that evolve? And, what are you, I would say, like, what would be the advice that you have to other sales enablement leaders, other sales leaders, even just other business leaders that they're trying to figure out, look, I'm responsible for this number. I've got limited time on how to make sure my team performs. What advice would you have about where that time should go based on, you're sort of leading the pack. You've done now a number of initiatives to help your people be better. Are you seeing the wins there? Like, where, knowing what you know now, how would you structure your time? Is it like 50% of your time on sort of like tools, tactics, messaging, and 50% on like, the person? Is it something totally different than that? Like, how would you, strategically, how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think about 75-25 right now. And that's basically because of our organization, right? So 75 tools and efficiencies that we can do with our products and messaging and all that. 25%, I'm starting to get there. I was at 0. So I'm like excited about getting to 25. I did a meditation course. It was a 4-month course. I opened it up and said, anyone on my inside sales desk that wants to sign up can sign up. We only have 16 spots, all 16 filled, and it was all of my top performers. And what was interesting about that is that I don't know if I've seen, I mean, we're still in the middle of it. So I don't know what the sales lift is going to be. I do know this, though. They are a lot happier. They are less stressed, and they continually thank me for investing in them. And we do a lot of training. This is the biggest one that I've ever had this many people reach out to me and say, this is like having a profound effect on my life. And to me, if I own a company, and right now, you don't want to be losing good people, because even if there's a lot of people out in the market, but a lot of them aren't high quality, I would say, for what we were looking for anyway. And I feel like the more I can keep people that I already have, it's cheaper. I think the culture stays intact, and I just think everyone's a lot happier. My retention level this year, I usually have a 30% turnover of people getting promoted or getting moved on. This year, I haven't had that. I think it's been like a 10% turnover. Now that could be due in fact to COVID, but I think a lot of it is they're happy. And to me, that at the end of the day, that's all you want, is you want happy employees.
Yeah. And if you have happy employees, they're
more
be
productive.
Great with their customers. They're more productive. Yes. And so how have you found, I mean, the nugget around engagement, it seems like was helpful for you, and specifically COVID brought that on. And, 2 questions. Have you found any other wins on saying, and in our case, we've actually done very rigorous ROI analysis, tying literally the minutes of sleep you get and how sleep deprived you are to how many, dollars you bring in at the end of the month. So we've done that work, and, super sophisticated analysis. From what I can tell, I don't think a single other, sort of tool that's offered to sales teams has that level of rigorous, evidence. But even that isn't enough to get a leader to say, yeah, I'm willing to put real budget behind this, in many cases. And so what's your advice for other leaders that are in your shoes that are saying, look, I'm trying to get meditation off the ground. I'm trying to get sleep off the ground. I'm trying to
Yeah.
get just some focus on it. I mean, how do you get your head of sales? How do you get your CFO over the hump to
Yeah.
say, I want to invest X amount in this?
Yep.
Like,
It's a
what's your
challenge.
pitch?
It's a challenge. So what I did was I just, like I said, I am a salesperson. So I have what's called the slow drip method. And I just slowly drip on, and I play the long game. I don't play the short game. So I will keep kind of reiterating it. And when I see him start to give in a little bit, that's when I kind of pounce in, or I'll see opportunities. COVID provided one of those opportunities. I bet that if COVID hadn't hit, I probably would have had another year before I would have gotten this approved.
Interesting.
I think because COVID caused such high stress levels in a lot of people, and people were so worried about depression, high depression rates, isolation with employees, because I have all millennials. They're now working at home in these studio apartments. And I think that fear of, oh my gosh, like we want to make sure people are okay right now, that helped me a lot. But what I would say is play the long game. I think it's a cultural change and shift for people. Sleep and nutrition and meditation are some of those things where that you either are a believer or you're not a believer. So if they're not a believer, then you've got to try to figure out what do they believe in and how do you kind of connect this to that. So, trying to use real life cases. I think it helps a lot that I did it myself. And for me to say, like, this has made such an impact on my life, and them seeing the change maybe for me in meetings, not
totally.
as stressed out and aggressive, and more like, okay, I'm listening. I'm still not the best at that, but I try. But I do think it's the long game, and just building up a slow case. And like I said, using this small group to do a little trial. I know I'm talking with Nick, as you know, to try to do something like that with Rise, because I think when they see that ROI on a small thing, they start to understand, wait a minute, this could be good. I think it just takes a little bit to shift the mindset.
So it's like, a couple things I'm hearing. One is, use the short-term opportunity of COVID, that like this is sharp in leaders' minds right now. And
totally.
And I don't know what your belief is, but I think it's like probably here to stay, because people are now thinking about this. People are going to be at home
and
more.
Winter's coming. That's what I keep saying.
Coming.
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming. And so use that. And there's an opportunity now to bring it up. But then additionally, can you launch a small pilot and somehow show ROI in whatever way is meaningful for, whoever is going to be signing the check ultimately, if it's, engagement, or if it's revenue, or if it's, how do you tie it to that?
Well, and I also did, so for my meditation budget, I did have to get approval from my boss, but it was a small enough amount that I actually had that in my own budget. So I used my own budget to pay for that, and then just went to him and said, hey, look, I'm thinking about doing this. I have a lot of people asking for it. Just thought I would try it. What do you think? And he said, yeah, that sounds great. You have the budget, go for it.
Do it.
So that is another one, just to do it small with a small amount of money that you don't need to get tons of approval.
Yeah.
And then take that result, and then I transition it into the next thing. Like, okay, now I want to offer it to some of my outside people.
Total. So like get the small win, show it's working, and leverage it. And we've seen
and then it's not threatening to them, right? It's not like you're asking for millions of dollars to go all in on something. You're just saying, I just want to try it.
Exactly. I like that approach. So one of the things that's interesting to me is, and we were talking about this actually before you got on the call, was you get like tons of cold email. A bunch of it's probably spam and whatever, but Nick sent you an email. And, we didn't know about your recent investment in meditation, but what made you respond to say, this is something I should like talk to this random person? I have no idea who this company Rise is. I have no idea who Nick is. I have no idea. And you had a meditation program going. What made you say, hey, I actually want to double down more? And like, I'm willing to take a call, other than maybe you were in a good mood that morning when you saw it.
No, it wasn't actually. So I was going through, I actually have struggled with sleep for quite a while. I'm going to be 50. So, with that comes a lot of struggle for sleep for women. So I've been dying on sleep for quite a while. And I know a lot of other salespeople that are in the same boat. And a lot of my salespeople say to me, my brain, I can't shut my brain off in the middle of the night. It's just so hard to slow down. And that was one of the reasons why we did meditation too, was I just said, that's helped me a bit, but I still am not sleeping all the time. So when I read that email that day, I'd had actually a really poor night of sleep. And when I read Nick's email, I was like, that's kind of good timing. So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to him and see what he has to say. And it's been great. But it is kind of interesting how I think the topic of sleep, there's more people than not that have issues sleeping. And I think that it's a topic that a lot of people have issues with, but they don't talk about. It's almost
Totally.
like mental health, right? Where it's like they don't want to talk about that, but they having
Yeah.
it.
And it's, I think what we've seen and what we've started to normalize at Rise, but maybe outside, is like getting away, there's this stigma of like, yeah, I've got sleep issues and maybe there's something wrong if I have sleep issues, but being able to normalize that a little bit and then really making it about like, the what we all feel, which is we're just a little tired. And that's actually why I
Yeah.
got into this about 10 years ago, is I was just fascinated with the observation that I'd wake up, I'd feel totally crappy, and I'd feel like depressed waking up in the morning. And then throughout the day, I'm like pounding coffee and I'm figuring out all these
Yeah.
other tools and techniques to try and stay awake. And like, I'm just like my brain is foggy. And it's like, is this really how I'm supposed to be feeling? And it didn't
Yeah.
sit right with me back then. And so, but the whole genesis of the company was just, there's so many people walking around tired that are just so underperforming their potential, not only at work and at home. And if
Right.
we could get people to understand how to flip tiredness and use their sleep as like just this huge advantage, we could
Totally.
see a big positive change in the world. And so that's, the moment we can get someone to be like, oh wow, now I have more energy because I like got a little more sleep, like that's the aha
Yeah.
moment.
Well,
In the
and think
same,
about how many nicer, kinder, more patient people there would be in the world too, right? Because I think that lack of sleep, I know for myself anyway, my family would make comments about like, hey, you're kind of on edge. Like you gotta like settle down a little bit. And I notice that the nights that I do get good sleep and then and I go to bed early just because I feel like, it gets me there. But I'm much happier, more
yeah.
focused, less edgy, you
Yeah,
know?
it's one of the things we've seen pretty consistently is sometimes someone will say like, I was, going to therapy and I was taking all of these, different medications and I thought I had paranoia and I thought I
Yeah.
had all these issues. And then I just started to get a little more sleep and it all went away. And,
Yes.
but it's not surprising if you look at the data, it's like, if you go from 7 hours of sleep to eight, or if you go from 8 hours sleep to 7 hours of sleep for a week,
Yep.
50% of people will feel clinical levels of anxiety. Like
Yeah.
most of us aren't even getting 7. So like,
No.
it's just, I think there's so much about mental health. I think that's important and expanding access, and sleep is
Yes.
not the cure all, but it is certainly a place that if you're having, any sort of issue with like, you're a little bit tired, you're not as productive as you want to be, you're finding it more hard than usual to get your work done, you're a little edgy at home. It's like, start there, then layer
Yeah.
in these other pieces. And
Totally.
why not? It's
Yeah.
free.
No, no, no. I know. I think the amazing thing for me is like the combination of the sleep, the meditation, and the food is like been insane to me at how much of a difference that makes. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just, and the exercise. I mean, I don't
totally.
exercise a ton. I probably do 4 days a week,
Okay.
which is a lot for me. I was doing none before, and but I just think that combination is like really amazing.
It's power. And then like to think about, like, imagine we take like a slice of your day now and compare it
Yeah.
to a slice of your day before all this.
Oh,
And
I
and
mean, I would
the
literally want to pull my car over on the side of the road and take a nap,
yeah, and that's
like a lot.
70% of the population, like,
Yeah.
yeah, like you want to do that. And now it's like you have energy, you're better with your family. It's
Yeah.
like, what's the value in that? Like, how would you price that? And then,
Oh,
that's how you
it's
figure out the return.
priceless.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
like, yeah,
really.
yeah. It's
So, and
so
then think
anyway,
about that for company and for people, employees. Like the other thing too is like if you give that back to an employee and it makes them more productive at work, that's great. But think about if it makes them happier at home and their family life gets better and all those things happen, then think about the reverse that you get back, which is they're so happy coming to work and they want to do a good job and they want to be productive. And They're just
Totally.
leading a more fulfilled life that just, it makes everyone win.
Right, right. And you're
So
paying people so much money every day, every hour. It's
totally.
like you want those hours to be locked in, and people to
Yeah.
be excited and happy.
Yeah.
So why, and this is just, if you look at John Hancock, like super forward thinking on the life insurance side, the Vitality program, I'm sure you have
Yep.
cutting edge HR, like, and I know HR's incentives are a lot about like cost cutting and medical spend and all of that. Like, why is this something, and HR in so many ways does amazing work, but what would be your coaching to, other leaders about how, is this something that comes in through sales or through another executive, or is this coming in through, HR?
Yeah, no, it didn't come. HR does do stuff, by the way. They do meditation programs, they do all of that. I think the difference is that and maybe I'm just biased because I'm a salesperson, but I think sales is just we're just salespeople are just different animals. And I think anything that comes from HR, we're kind of like, it's corporate.
Yep.
When it comes through sales for sales, they're like, this is for me. I like it. And
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more applicable to what they're doing specifically. And I think when you tailor it to the person or to the group, I think there's more buy-in. It's a
Interesting.
little weird, I know, but
Yeah.
I just think when it comes from HR, it's like you got to find it yourself. You got to go look for it. You're with like computer programmers and something where you're like, I have no relation to these people at all. Like it's just
Right.
it's different.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I know we've heard
Yeah.
that if HR leads it, adoption is just so low versus, if
Yeah.
sales leads it. And
Yeah.
adoption is really what matters anyway. So I'm gonna let you go because I know we're pretty much over time here, but I want to leave with one final tip for the audience, which is there one thing that you've done? And we've talked a lot about different things you've done, but is there one thing that comes to mind that sort of rises above the rest of that you feel has had an outsized impact on how you show up every day, at work and at home,
Yeah.
and it could be just the combination of activities you're doing to support your own well-being, but is there something that for you comes to mind is like that one thing is powerful?
Yeah, so I've been taking the meditation class actually with the people because I always feel like you can get better and I wanted to learn a little bit more. And one of the things I learned in that in September, and I've been doing it every day, even on the weekends, and it has made a huge difference in me, is I meditate for 5 minutes at my desk before I start my day. And then as soon as I'm done, I write down the three things I want to get done that day. And it could be work, it could be home. Like I wasn't always home. COVID's been really great for me because I actually see my girls. I have a 12 and a 14-year-old, like I had told you. And you know, it may be that I want to go to this, watch the swim meet on Zoom because I can't go. But something like that. I think it just helps me focus because there's a lot of different things that can compete for our attention. And I find being on Zoom all day, it's very hard to stay focused and I get very ADD. And I think that 5 minute meditation centers me for the day. And then having the three or four things that I say, I'm really going to get this done that day. It's so nice at the end of the day to say like, oh my gosh, I got three of the four done, or oh, I only got two. But at least it's in the back of my head and I kind of think it keeps me focused. So I would say that that's
I
been
love
kind of a
that.
game changer for me.
Yeah, and
Something so
it's something
simple.
so simple,
Yeah.
and to get started. Cool. Well, this has been
So
so fun to be able
so
to
fun.
discuss. Yeah, and just to hear your story from, thinking sales might be interesting to making it a career out of it, now really leading in so many ways, helping people just be more fulfilled at work and ultimately, produce as well. But it's all part of the same, unified theory. So it's exciting to see that play out, and really looking forward to getting to do some work together and proving out some
Awesome.
ROI and getting people sleeping better.